Have you ever heard the saying, you are what you eat? That couldn't be more true with some of the research that is coming out recently. Are you feeding yourself with fruits, vegetables, whole grains, good sources of protein? Or are you maybe settling for some of those quicker, more grab and go, shopping in the processed foods and things like that? Well, that is what we're going to talk about on today's episode, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Holistic Travel Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Condon, occupational therapist.
And I'm John Wilson, doctor of physical therapy.
And this special episode is all about ultra processed foods. We're going to dive deep into what they are, how they differentiate from some other types of foods out there, and the effects that they have on your body. This is a not to miss episode.
Yeah, definitely. Ultra processed foods are basically foods that are processed a lot. They're added a lot of preservatives to keep things on the shelves, a ton of added sugar, just a lot of things that are really not great for you. And Americans actually consume an average American's diet is 60% ultra processed foods, which is just amazing to me. It's more than half of what they're eating is ultra processed foods. So basically, that means it's not real foods. You're really just eating chemicals, you're eating preservatives, you're eating that added sugar, and it's led to 30 plus different diseases, different disorders, such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, the list goes on and on. We're going to talk about a few of those today and a few of the recent studies that we've both been looking at and been researching lately in the last 4 years, even just kind of seeing the increase in the consumption of ultra processed foods and then the direct correlation to these chronic diseases.
Beautifully worded, John. Yeah. So, as John mentioned, ultra processed foods go through a lot of different types of processes, whether it's, milling or molding and adding in a lot of extra chemicals, sugars, not great oils that are contributing to lots of different diseases. The biggest differentiation here is that you're going to have minimally processed foods or, unprocessed foods that consist of your normal fruits, vegetables, normal good sources of protein, things like that. Then you're going to have some of your processed foods. So those are going to be where you within your own home are combining things, right? You even process foods while you cook them. So that would be considered a processed food. If you take raw broccoli, put a little bit of olive oil on it and bake it, you now have a processed food. What we want to stay away from is those ultra processed foods. So the things like sodas, cookies, breads, crackers, the list goes on and on, cereals, even, deli meat, things like that are really filled with other things. You want to always be very mindful of what you're putting in your body. As I kind of stated in the beginning, you are what you eat really takes that to a next level. If you are fueling your body with good nutrients, omega-3 fatty acids, good sources of protein, polyphenols, fruits, vegetables, you're going to have a way different trajectory as far as disease and overall health and lifestyle than if you're filling your body with some of these ultra processed foods.
Yeah, and the reason is the body doesn't know how to react to it. And that's the biggest thing. The body is taking this as the chemicals and preservatives that you're putting in it, the added sugar, and it's storing it or breaking it down, and it just doesn't really know what to do with it because it's not real food. So if you're just giving your body that kind of food, then you're not actually getting any of the benefits. So your body's just going to be hungry. So for example, if someone's overweight, direct correlation to the ultra processed foods, they're eating a lot. It's very hyper palatable.
Yes, hyper palatable. So they
right.
taste good.
They make them in the labs. They taste amazing, but basically you just want to come back for more. Great example is a bag of chips. Obviously, you can eat an entire bag of chips or an entire tub of ice cream, and you're just still hungry.
Right. Yeah. You don't realize how much you're eating
because your body isn't getting any real benefit from eating all that. So basically it's like, hey, like I still need these antioxidants. I still need vitamin C, vitamin B, and so on, but I'm not getting it.
All these things.
I'm still going to be hungry. And that's where that obesity comes in. And that's where, 50% of people nowadays in America are obese, and it's actually
Yeah.
insane. Type 2 diabetes is
Right.
another thing. It comes from obesity, comes from that added sugar, the added preservative, same kind of deal, and that just leads to a plethora of more diseases and disorders.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a pretty big cycle. If you are indulging in some of these foods, which, again, John's, as he stated, 60% of a individual's diet comes from ultra processed foods. If you maybe just try to switch those numbers and you try to focus on getting in more minimally processed or unprocessed foods, fruits, vegetables, or processed foods that you're baking yourself at home, that's when you're really going to see that difference in all those causes of mortality, all those Alzheimer's disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes. Your risk for those is going to start to substantially decrease.
Definitely. And I just want to touch on a couple studies that we have here. A study done in 2020 and published in the Cambridge Journal actually talked about an increase in ultra processed food consumption was associated with increased risk of all cause mortality, cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, and depression. So, again, mental health, physical health. I mean, when you look at the number one, number two, number three killers, what is the main issue of these?
Right.
And it all comes back to ultra processed foods. So, cerebrovascular disease, blood clots, you're really not allowing your blood to flow throughout the body when you're consuming these ultra processed foods. So that was a big study that really that showed the mental side of it, but also the physical.
Right. And I think a big takeaway from that is that unfortunately, you don't see the negative side effects of eating ultra processed foods immediately. Something like cardiovascular disease, cerebral vascular disease, stroke, they don't happen overnight. If you had a hamburger one day and immediately the next day you had a heart attack, you'd probably never eat a hamburger again. The issue is that it's just not going to take one bag of chips or one, tub of ice cream. It's constantly doing it over and over again that it's culminating within your body that's leading to that ultimate cardiovascular disease, stroke, you name it. It's that combination over time that's really impacting Americans.
Definitely, it's messing with the chemicals in your brain, which is a big thing with the depression and mental health, which we talked about in another episode. But published in the Journal of Nutrition in 2022 was another study. It was a meta-analysis with 400,000 participants.
Wow,
So
that's a lot of people.
so you're getting the best information. This ain't Wikipedia. Basically, the findings demonstrated that healthier diet patterns characterized with higher intakes of fruit, vegetables, whole grains, fish, olive oil, low-fat dairy, and low levels of ultra-processed foods, such as the Mediterranean anti-inflammatory diet, which is what we talk about.
Yeah, we've talked about that multiple times.
Are associated with reduced risk of mental disorder and depression.
So again, in our 2 episodes ago when we talked about, what does holistic mean, that connection, that is what we're bringing to here, guys, that there is real evidence, study after study, showing the link between the consumption of ultra processed foods and all these different mental, physical, emotional disorders.
Yeah. And again, we understand because it is hyper palatable. It is very easy. It's cheap, right?
Right,
So
of course.
we completely understand. The biggest thing that we both talk about is bringing that number down, right? It shouldn't be at 60% of our diet. A lot of people, especially in the more obese states, actually 80% of their diet is ultra processed foods.
Right.
So when you're thinking about that, you're only getting 20% minimally processed or non-processed foods. So that should be switched, right? So
Yeah,
we always
that's
say
all we're trying to do is find a
80%,
little bit more of a balance.
definitely 80%, minimally processed to non-processed at all, and 20%, if not less, of the ultra processed foods.
Right. And there's some great resources out there if you're like, I don't cook, I don't know what to cook, someone help me. There's so many great resources. We are big fans of Sean Stevenson. He has a family cookbook out there. So he really took some amazing, some of your favorite recipes and he put a healthy twist on them and he really dives deep into the research there about a lot of these things that we're talking about. And, just kind of finding out maybe some foods that you do like first and increasing your intake of them. If you really like broccoli, roast some broccoli. And it's
Hmm.
okay if you are doing it a few nights in a row. It's probably better than you doing something more processed and not getting in any of those nutrients.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I hear, because I do talk about this with my patients, especially the ones who are dealing with chronic pain or mental health in the clinic, um, a lot of people say that they just don't have the time. They don't have the time to cook. They got too much other stuff going on. And I always just, again, I talked about this before. I just never understand that, because then where are your priorities, right? If you don't have the time, then you're just going to be dealing with this for in your entire life. And is that the life that you want to live? So find the time, whether it's Sunday and you're cooking for the week and you're really, Courtney does an amazing job at this, of just going to the farmer's market, $15, filling up the bag full of
I know.
vegetables,
Shout out to the Denver farmers markets. They,
two for 20,
I know. He
big
almost
bag,
got me.
and just cooking all the vegetables on Sunday, and then splitting it up, whether it's your lunch, whether it's even for dinner. Using the air fryer, you can put something in the air fryer, super easy.
Yeah, and quick. And again,
Yeah,
you're just you're finding a little bit more of that balance. We're not saying completely cut it out. It's very hard. We love to have some chips or some ice cream if we
yeah.
are in the mood for it, but it's all about finding that balance and bringing those numbers down because you're lacking so many nutrients by focusing solely on ultra processed foods.
Yeah, and a big thing for me was the cereal, right? I would always have cereal, love cereal. Right on the top of the box was whole grains, the heart on the Cheerios, right? Like, this is good for me. Why am I not just going to have a ton of cereal? And I definitely felt like that was kind of contributing to my gut issues a little bit. So finding a different approach to that late night snack, whether it's low fat yogurt, throwing a little grainless granola, always looking at the snacks that you might get, the cereal, the granola, and look at the ingredients. Really
Right,
look at
right.
it for the added sugar, look for the preservatives, the things that you don't understand and don't know. Either look them up, or they're probably not good for you.
Yeah, again, looking at the added sugar, looking at do you know what every single word in the ingredients means? I was very lucky. My mother kind of taught me at a young age, like you want foods that have like 5 or less ingredients, 7 or less ingredients. If you can't read, if you don't understand the ingredients, you probably shouldn't be putting it in your body. But I understand not everyone got that education, so it was something that I would just kind of instilled throughout my life, looking at the ingredients on the back. And yes, it does take more time when you're grocery shopping. However, it's because you want those ultra processed foods. If you don't, then you just shop for your fruits and vegetables, your protein, your eggs, your milk, and you're done,
Yeah.
right? But if you do want to include those foods into your diet, just take a little bit of that extra time. There are so many great companies out there now that are putting out better products for you that taste amazing that won't give you some of those negative effects that we're talking about here today.
Yeah, and a lot of those ingredients, more and more research is coming out about those ingredients as well. That is a direct link to cancer. So a lot of the preservatives, especially the added sugar, the red 40, and
Yeah,
a few of the other ones that I can't pronounce, but
gluten.
yeah, that are in a lot of the ultra processed foods, ultra processed snacks. So just be aware. Just take a look. I also kind of wanted to touch about, this is from the same study published in the Journal of Nutrition in 2022. It says ultra processed foods typically lack fiber, polyphenols, omega-3 fatty acids, essential vitamins and minerals. Of the non-ultra processed foods, such as vegetables, nutrient dense fruits, legumes, whole grains, fatty fish, lean meats. We've talked about this before. Nuts, seeds. These nutrient poor profiles have been implicated in prevalence, incidence, and severity of depression through a number of interacting pathways, including inflammation, oxidative stress, and effect of the gut microbiome. So, like we talked about in episodes before, the gut controls a lot of the serotonin. It's directly linked to your brain. So if your microbiome is off and the bacteria in the gut is off, you're not getting the pro and prebiotics from the real food, then you're going to suffer and you're going to be mentally not yourself. You're going to have depression, anxiety, and increased stress.
Yes, Jon, thank you. That reminds me of one other thing that I wanted to talk about today, that a lot of these processed foods are void of fiber, that prebiotic fiber that Jon is talking about. They may say, with added fiber on it, but it's not the same kind of fiber that you would get from eating the whole fruit, vegetable, and getting that benefit into your body is so important. It is directly feeding all those microbes within your gut that are helping you to fight off infection, increase your immune system, decrease your risk of all cause mortality. There are so many benefits, guys, to eating a minimally processed or non-processed food diet.
Absolutely. Another study, 2021 Advances in Nutrition Journal, talks about ultra processed foods directly linked to CVD. So that's cerebrovascular disease again, dysglycemia, dyslipidemia, hypertension, obesity, inflammation, dysfunction, and oxidative stress. So again, talking about the same kind of things, study after study after study, meta-analysis after meta-analysis, talking about the benefits of eating non-processed foods and the risks of eating ultra-processed foods.
Yes, Jon, that is amazing. Again, I think as we kind of come to a little bit of a full circle moment here, right? We talked about the difference between ultra processed foods and non processed or minimally processed foods. We talked about some of the places you might see them. We also discussed what the negative impacts on our body are as we consume these ultra processed foods, and a few little tricks and tidbits on how we can maybe increase more minimally processed or non processed foods, as well as be mindful of the processed foods that we are getting in. So I think that it is very clear that if you guys are maybe tilting the scales a little bit towards, as Jon mentioned, that 60% ultra processed foods, there is so much resources, information, help that we can provide, and is out there on the internet completely free, of ways that you can just start to flip those numbers a little bit. Where can you give a little more and take a little less? As Jon said, cereal, when I first met Jon, was like he's like,
stable.
Yeah, he's like, you can feed me all the fruits and vegetables you want. I'm having cereal at night. And I was like, perfect, because I never want you, myself, anyone to feel like you can't enjoy the things that you enjoy.
Yeah,
Why are we living this life if we can't enjoy the things we love? I mean,
no, we still have ice cream every now and then. I mean,
yeah,
we still have some snacks every now and then, definitely. But I think, again, like we talked about before, just trying to get that down as much as you can. The frozen meals, I used to have frozen meals a lot. Again, same kind of thing. Tons of added sodium, a lot of preservatives in there in the frozen meals, a lot of preservatives in anything that's going to be on the shelf for a long time.
But frozen fruits and vegetables, if you look on the back and it says broccoli, peas, carrots,
organic,
that is fine. Maybe you're new to this and you're like, I don't want to buy a big thing of broccoli
by myself.
by myself and not eat it, and now I'm wasting food. That's perfectly fine to buy some frozen fruits and vegetables,
Yeah.
And it's a little bit easier to incorporate them. Maybe you're not a big, like, fresh off the vine fruit kind of person, but you can tolerate some fruit in a smoothie, right?
Yeah, smoothie's big.
Get those frozen fruits, put them in a smoothie with some, milk and some good sources of fat. You're making a minimally processed food now processed, but you're staying away from those ultra processed foods. So that's what we're really trying to educate you guys on today. Those ultra processed foods are those things that you really want to start to minimize in your diet. You want to try to cut them out. You want to make healthy swaps, and that's why we're here. So what's the challenge this week, Jon?
The challenge is look at your diet, right, throughout the week and kind of look at what you're eating. And if you feel like you're over 50% of ultra processed foods, try to take one thing out, whether it's, okay, I
love it.
fast food once a day, I have cereal once a day, I have ice cream once a day, whatever it is, try to just take one thing out per day. And again, you can have 35% of your diet
Yeah.
being ultra processed foods, and then you get better and better. And that's kind of exactly what I did from a personal standpoint. I feel like 10 years ago, a lot of in high school, I would say 80% of my diet was ultra processed foods in high school, if not more. I don't even know if I ate anything that wasn't ultra processed. And then college, I started getting a little bit better. Still, had a lot. And then just every year after that, I feel like, okay, this year I'm having less cereal. This year I'm having less fast food. And now I'm at the point where it's probably around 10% of my diet is ultra processed. So still trying to get that number down, but from a personal standpoint,
That's
I
so
definitely,
amazing.
yeah, definitely can see the difference.
Yeah, so that is our challenge to you this week, guys. Look at your diet. Where is your intake of ultra processed foods? Where can you make a few swaps, right? So if you do that, please let us know in the comments below. We thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. I got an email today. It was like over 50 downloads of the podcast. And that was just so exciting to see. So we appreciate it so much. If there's anything you guys want to hear on the podcast, drop it in the comments below. But other than that, we'll see you next week.
Peace.